We are thrilled. We are thrilled to have Barbara Vines, a renowned genealogist, speaking at our fall seminar. With over 30 years of experience and numerous accolades, Barbara is a professional genealogist. Barbara has lots of initials after her name, and I want you to just think about what they all mean. I don't know what they all mean, but you could look at her site and you'll see she is a CG, an FNGS, an FUGA, and FVGS. She has lectured over the past 30 years plus at conferences in 32 states on research, methodology, Virginia and West Virginia resources in writing and publishing. She was editor of the quarterly magazine for Virginia Genealogy since 1996 and a winner of the NGS Quarterly Award of Excellence in 2001 and 2022. She has written many articles and publications from the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, the National Genealogical Society newsletter, and the Board of Certification for Genealogists. She is currently the editor of the National Genealogical Society's Research in State series, and those are located in the library too. Excellent, excellent series. You don't have. Okay, all right. But we welcome Barbara, and we look forward to what she's going to present to us.
All right. Well, we'll start with an explanation of what's going to happen, because I'm used to having presenter views so I can see what's coming next. And I didn't realize that using Zoom this way, I needed a second screen. The second screen is at home. So I don't know what's coming next. However, there are 119 slides in this presentation, so we're probably not going to get quite through all of the examples since we're starting a little late here, but we'll try. I'll talk fast. My email address is on the handout. Feel free to write and ask questions. Just know that if you don't hear from me for the first 2 or 3 days, you better try again, because it may be a year before I find your email. I don't mind being reminded that, did you get it? And I'll go, oops, yeah, I did. I just didn't answer it. All right, we're going to start with order and minute books. A lot of people probably have never used one, but these are any court of record. That's your county court, your city municipal court, your superior courts, the Supreme Court. They all have order and minute books because they record the actions of the court, whatever the court was. Now, here in Virginia, up until post-Revolutionary War, post-Civil War, what you had was a justice of the peace court that served both as a court of record and as the court that ran the local, everything from the roads to the schools, whatever it was. Today, you have a board of supervisors in the county that does that sort of thing, and then you have a judge over a regular court. But up and through 1851, you had both functions run by the justice of the peace. They recorded the deeds. You'll get records of people recording deeds. You'll also see, we'll talk about that in a minute. So, but at any rate, you get everything. Now, the bad part about this is that you have to read it. There is usually the only index will be an index that says Jones versus Smith. And that's it. you don't even get, first names, so you know which Jones it is. So it's essentially, unless they've been transcribed, and more people have been publishing transcripts of the early ones. The Spratios, especially north of the James River, have transcribed a lot of these. So you can get those on occasion, and they are indexed. Pay attention to the headings, and the headings may be in the middle of the page, but if you want to get the exact date, you really do need to pay attention to the headings. There are a couple of things because they run more than one court. Cities will have either a hustings court or a corporation court or a municipal court. It's all the same thing. Just depends on what they're calling it. Right. County courts just have a county court, but they do have special trials on occasion. And one of these is your court of oyer and terminer. Those usually mean that they are trying a felony case involving either the enslaved or free blacks. Because they don't have to send, typically, if it's a felony criminal trial prior to the end of the Civil War, what they did was they would send them to the general court in Richmond to be tried. So you'll find out, oh, well, he's being tried for murder, and then you wait to see what happened, and you don't find out anything else. That's because that was in Richmond at the general court, and all of those records burned in 1865. So you're going to have to hope it made the newspaper. That's about the only way you're going to find out what happened to any of those trials. Spotsylvania, Fredericksburg, had a district court starting in 1789. And so you find in Spotsylvania, this is a list of all the courts that they have papers for up through 1851. They had a mayor's court, a hustings corporation court, a circuit court, a city council, a court of chancery, a court of law, a court of law and chancery, and a circuit court. Right now, that was just Fredericksburg. Those are, and see, Spotsylvania courthouse is where you would expect to find a lot of these court papers. But for a number of years, Spotsylvania held their meetings in Fredericksburg rather than at the courthouse. And so the papers tend to stay wherever the court was. So that's what you want to be careful about. When something gets chopped off, they don't go all the way back, especially with the, even with the deeds, with anything like that. That stays wherever the court was held. The other problem that you're going to run into is if you notice, one of the things that they had was a district court from 1789 to 1812. Well, district courts took in a circle. So Madison County, Orange County, Culpeper County, all of these, they would send the court cases to Fredericksburg, and that's where the trial is. Okay. So you have to do some sleuthing, and you have to pay attention to the dates to find some of these papers. You use order and minute books really to take you the next step in a lot of cases, because that tells you that, let's say John Jones sold his land and took off for Kentucky, and he didn't go to court to acknowledge the deed. So the guy gets the witnesses. You have to have 3 witnesses in Virginia to acknowledge deeds. So he would get the witness to go to court and say, you know, I saw him sign a deed, so that the deed would be recorded. And you'll see a little entry in the order book that says, so-and-so came in and swore to that he witnessed the deed, and we order it certified. Right. Next witness comes in and orders it certified. only when the third witness comes in that it's ordered recorded. So you have unrecorded deeds, which are usually in packets, somewhere in the clerk's papers. But the only way you know who purchased that land or how it was transferred is those early certifications that are only in the order book. So you don't know to go look for a packet of unrecorded deeds. Land, probate, vital statistics, local and regional courts, all of these, you have orphans courts, usually once a year. They will set aside a period of time at the court meeting to deal with orphans records. And that's when you see people coming in and showing their accounts and being noticed. So if you're trying to track a young child, that's one of the places to go. You get law, criminal. Now, here's the difference. You get criminal, that's felon. All right, so theft, murder, assault and battery, that's all criminal. Law is when you're dealing with things like suits for debt, right? Trespass, that sort of thing. And Chancery is the one we're going to be talking about next, and that's known as the fairness issue. And that's the one that you really like to find out about, because that's where you deal with most probate issues and a lot of others that give you a lot of names. Sometimes you will find in the county court papers, you will find a order or minute book that is dealing only with the court of law or only with the court of chancery. So you need to pay particular attention to the titles, okay, to know what you're dealing with there. You will also, on occasion, find some federal records, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but you will also find, especially up in this area, Arlington, Alexandria, there are federal court records in the county, still among the county court records here. If you go to a different state, and maybe I better stop here just a minute. When I say order or minute books, how many of you know the difference? That's what I thought. Okay. And it's a lot of fun. The minutes are supposed to be the rough minutes that the clerk was taking while the court was in session. Then he was supposed to, notice supposed to, go back to the clerk's office and write them out with more detail, and in better handwriting, hopefully. Minute books are not noted for their clarity of the writing. Okay, so sometimes you can get both, which is nice, especially when you're trying to figure out what the name is. And this one, you can go look in the other one to see if it's a little bit clearer. Usually you get one or the other. Sometimes you will have minutes and the clerk never got around to writing, the order, writing it out as an order book. The only thing that survives is the minute book. Sometimes heaven only knows what happened to the minute book. All that survives is the order book. And he may have been taking minutes, on pieces of paper that got tossed later. But there should be a record book there. And it's usually labeled either order or minute. And you just pay attention to the dates on them to try to track, because sometimes, especially in the very early colonial period, there will be missing order and minute books so that you won't find everything. You can search using keywords in FamilySearch because these have all been up through the 1860s at least. Virginia's are all available online. But you can also look for federal records as well. you can see some here. You'll get inventories, Southern, I don't know. Oh, I didn't tell it to do that. Here, let me see if I can get it to do this. Hey, how about that? Okay. So sometimes there will be National Archives microfilm so that you can actually look for federal records as well as for state records. And you'd be surprised how many people end up, people don't think about looking at federal court records. But if you've got a family and somebody gets his nose out of joint over an estate settlement, and the guy who's suing is in Kentucky and he's suing the guy in Virginia, you have to go to federal court. So you might want to pay more attention. You're still going to end up in Chancery in most cases, but you might want to pay more attention to federal records. And some of these are online now. We'll see an example later on about that. But you can get a number of federal records this way, right? Peel it case files, you can go track it all the way up. I've got an example later on that ended up in the Supreme Court, if I remember correctly. All right. Filmed by the Library of Virginia, the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, and it's among the Virginia records here still, because somebody, when they carted off the district, when they gave us back the land, they didn't take all the papers with them. Some of them stayed in the courthouse. And so you'll see random items that are actually either federal records or district of DC records, either one. It's interesting. If you go to the Library of Virginia's website and look in Arlington and Alexandria for the filmed records, you'd be amazed at what you find sometimes. They also have at the district, if you look here at the District Court of Columbia, Superior Court held at the courthouse in the town of Alexandria in 1803. And the guys were coming in, they were on board a ship, and they're coming in and they're suing for their wages. So you get that sort of thing. It's quite interesting sometimes. You get indexes sometimes, but usually it's by plaintiff and defendant only. And I'm going to show you something at the end that may make this a little bit easier, okay? But they do have plaintiffs. Sometimes they will have defendant as well. If they have a defendant index, that is by the defendant rather than the plaintiff, then it's usually going to say, instead of versus VS or V, it will say ADS, meaning adversus. All right. So if you get one where it's sitting down there, and it's all adversus, then that's the defendant that you're saying, not the other. The problem is that invariably, you get the first name, the first surname. If there are multiple people suing, for whatever reason, you will get in the title normally. Now, in the Library of Virginia's Chancery file is different, but normally in any of the clerks, it's going to be Porter versus Smith, Smith versus Porter, and maybe 5 other people involved, but they won't be listed. The clerk only lists the first of each one. Also want to look, sometimes there are separate indexes, sometimes there are internal indexes. So you want to look for both. Remember what I told you about, when boundaries change, you need to go back. People didn't move when they divided a county. They're still there, but you've got to go back to the parent county for the records. So don't forget, watch for that. Then you've got district courts of law. Notice what happens when it started out. The district court lasted for 11, 19 years. All right. It started out being one county. Then all of these counties during that time period, were added. Winchester started out as Frederick and Shenandoah only, but then Berkeley, Hampshire, and Hardy was added. And the same things, the one held at Stanton, they picked up Pendleton County when it was cut off. So watch that sort of thing. The Superior Court of Chancery in Augusta County was this entire area from 1802 to 1832. So if you're in West Virginia, you have to come back to Augusta County for any of these records, including the order books, right? Of course, what's nice about it is that they're also included in the Library of Virginia's Chancery Record Index. So you get a lot of extra stuff there. The papers and related materials transfer or was summarized. What happens is a felony case that's sent to the general court, you're going to get the initial entry. All of the papers involved in the court case are going to go to the general court, Fort Byrne, all right? But if it was a district court, you're going to track it to the district court, and those papers are going to be in the district court. So in Orange County, I was looking for a will. I couldn't find it. Turned out that somebody didn't like the way the will was written, and so they tried to quash the will, got sent to the district court in Fredericksburg. The will went to the district court in Fredericksburg. It did not stay in Orange County. It was never recorded in Orange County. So I had to go to the papers, the loose papers in Fredericksburg in order to get it. So you see what I'm saying? No copy machines, no cameras. They typically just bundled up the papers and sent it on when they referred to the case. And I've already talked about that, so we'll go through that only. And this is a very quick sample of what you get. This was the Adams versus Sisson court case, and that's how it's indexed. Adams versus Sisson. All right. Notice that there are chambers here. There are fleets. Okay, there are fennels. All right. 17 different people are listed, including some wives. Under Adams versus Simpson, guess whose division of property was being contested? Now, look. We're the majority of the name. Chambers. Yeah. But you don't find it in any of the indexes because the index is Adams versus Sisson. So you need to know who all the in-laws are. And this happens frequently because, and they weren't fighting. What happened is a couple of the parties who died, a couple of them were had children who were underage, and they had to get a court order to divide the estate because the children's part had to be protected because he had given pieces of property, John and Joe or whatever. So what you have is a very friendly suit, and a lot of times that friendly suit is started by a son-in-law because he happens to be, still there in the county and everybody else is taken off for Kentucky. So it's the son-in-law that's listed and not the family that you're chasing. So you need to know who all the in-laws are as well and look for them. It was the estate of Thomas Chambers that they were trying to get divided. When you run into a burned record county, and you're looking for something like this, newspapers are a good source. And most, or a lot of them, at least these days, have been OCR'd. And so maybe you'll be able to latch on to them. Because if there is any absent person involved in the court suit, they have to advertise it before they can hold the case, so that they can pick up the out of state people. So you have here, again, some Bhutan estate that you look at, and this is, I'll do that one. And the reason it's being advertised is, and it appearing by satisfactory evidence, they're not inhabitants of the state, then the court has ordered this to be published. Usually in the very first entry, they will write in all of the parties to a suit. After that, you're likely not to see it. The suits can be continued for years. Know what a docket book is? All right. If you can find them, they usually haven't been filmed. But if you can find them, a docket book is a lot like, our little schedules that we keep these days, where you know what you're supposed to be doing on day 1 or day 2. They enter the suit, and then every time it's continued and the parties show up, they write it down so you can track the course of the suit through the court. And there's a very good reason that you want to do this, because if you find somebody being sued, what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to find when the court case ended, because that's when you get the papers. The clerk files the papers on the ended date of the suit. We'll talk about this more when we get to Chancery records. And I'm going to skip over this because I am going to run out of time, and we'll talk about that as well when we get to that. All right. Chancery court order books usually, again, are the same that I've already discussed. But you get beautiful information in some of these. How long has he been there? The guy's giving a deposition, so he tells you about this, where he lived, where he had been working.
Pull my car out.
Okay. I got a little competition here. All right.
I had shoes on when I was up there.
What I love is, how many times are you going to find out that somebody gets the washing done 8 months at somebody's house?
Oh, another meeting?
It's a lot of fun sometimes. Okay.
Terry call you? Was that Terry Mobile? It has here Terry Mobile's lit up. You didn't call her, so.
Okay. That my husband and I were doing is I was talking on a cell phone, and I had just taken the phone off the hook to go tell him real quick. And so he's sitting there trying to talk to the guy, and he's hearing me and the other guy at the same time. So I understand. All right. But this is the type of thing you get details from the depositions that are found nowhere else. And they're not necessarily details about the person who's being sued. Because, he's explaining how he knows all of this information. So one of the things that you want to do when you're involved is pay attention to the neighbors too. All right. Finding children. Okay. So this is where it gets fun in court orders. Court suits they're nice too, but these are the other things you find. Court records will, because the court has to order if they're poor children. The overseers of the poor or the church, before the overseers of the poor, the church had the responsibility for finding out poor children until the end of the Revolutionary War, at which point the church took over. The overseers of the poor took over then in 1785. So you can find details in the overseers of the poor book if they survive, in church records, again, if they survive. But at least you get the name of the child, and usually, not always, depends on the clerk, get the name of the parent. And you can make a rough guess, and sometimes they tell you the age as well. Sometimes they don't. You will also find underage people represented either by a guardian or by a next friend. Usually the next friend is a relative. Sometimes a mother, because if she hasn't remarried, she can show up in court as a next friend for her children. Yeah. So you'll see her, Polly Smith, next friend for John Smith. And so she has to be 21. Whoever's the next friend has to be 21. You're representing someone who is underage. Now watch this, because I've run into this. Some court clerks change if the suit was in progress when the guy reached 21. They didn't change, they didn't drop the next friend part. He was actually representing himself at that point, or could, but you will see it go next friend and say, well, he's not 21 yet. Well, I happen to have proof that in a couple of cases that yes, he had. It was just the court case continued, and the clerk just continued using the same name. You see this in patents too, where when the survey was made, it was in this county. Then before they ever got the patent, they created a new county, and it's now over here in this new county, but the patent is issued in the old county's name because that's what survey was in. So you have to watch those things. Witnesses in court do not have to be 21. This is a witness, not a party to a suit. They can actually be under the age of 14, but usually they're 14. Right? They can be under the age of 14 if they are questioned and they understand the difference between right and wrong. So they can be, but I usually figure they're probably 14. Well, some of them didn't know how old they were. So, it's a guesstimate. There's no question about that. You'll see appointments of guardians. And the one that I really love is the selection of guardians, because at the age of 14, they can go into court and say, I want to change my guardian. I want so-and-so to be my guardian. Okay. They can be charged with crimes or social indiscretions, of which there are a variety. They can be named in a will, a deed, or a state division and be underage. Right? Or they can be named in a court suit because they're the reason there's a court suit, because they're underage and the estate can't be divided when they're underage. Indentured servants by law and enslaved individuals had to be brought after about 1650, had to be brought into court and have their age adjudged, because what they were trying to do is, when do they get on the tax rolls? Okay. So what you had was, and again, it's an estimate. The court looks at him and, he's so tall or so short or whatever. And well, he's about 8 or he's about 10, whatever. So take it with a grain of salt. They're not bringing in Bible records, trust me. Okay. But you get their names and and an approximate age. It's going to be. In the early days, occasionally you will get really neat things like when somebody was applying for a patent, they had to improve the land. And so sometimes these improvements are listed in the court order books. So you may get that. You get the county budget. And sometimes this is the only reference you have to your John Jones because he came in with a Wolf Scout and he got paid for it. All right. They defined the tax precincts, which were usually militia districts in the early time period. Because in that way, you can sort of figure out based upon who the militia captain is about where they lived in the county. Because you can usually find out where the militia captain lived. You don't necessarily know where your guy lived if he didn't own land. You get your tax takers appointed, your constables appointed, and you get people who are excused from taxes, either for reason of age. Virginia never had an upper limit on their poll tax. So, you know, you could be 100 and whatever and still be paying, you know, unless you went into court and said, I'm too old to work. And then they would be excused. Or, you know, that sometimes you will see them being excused until they're able again. And that suggests that they've been injured in some way and they've got to broke a leg or an arm or something. And they're going to have to recover. Okay. Then you have licenses for taverns, houses of private entertainment, and a list of how much they could charge for everything. And by the way, the houses of private entertainment were lodging houses. In other words, you were taking in lodgers for an extended period of time. You weren't a tavern that let everybody walk in through the door. You would not believe how long it took me to find out what that was. And how many people thought it was something else. You get head rights. And sometimes people come in and prove their head rights a long time after they actually got here. There's an article in the magazine of Virginia Genealogy, Ron Wilson wrote once, and he found the guy over in England, and he tracked him to his head right claim in Virginia to the time he showed up on a patent being proved, and it was like a 40-year span. You know, and people assumed it was only a couple or 3 years. Loss of property and service, Revolutionary War service or service in the French and Indian War or whatever. So you get your importations. This is his first, they always had to put that in. They wouldn't give it to him if he didn't say it was the first time of proving it, whether it was or not. I mean, you know, it may or may not have been. And watch for this. Immediately does not mean yesterday. It means directly. Okay? He came directly from England here. And you'll see Germans doing that because they went from Germany to England and then from England here. And so, well, it can't be Germany came from England. Well, that's not exactly, you know, doesn't work that way. Right. Runaway slaves of the enslaved and servants, you get the penalties. Usually it was additional service, double the time missed, plus the cost of catching. Unfortunately, because the enslaved were permanently enslaved, they usually were whipped instead. Or sometimes the others were too. And you get, see, 7 months and 24 days for the time lost. 25 lashes on his bare back. And you find out sometimes how far they went, who it was, who the owners were. And this is one time where it can help you find the owner of an enslaved individual, because if they had run away, a lot of times it names the owner, which is something that you don't get otherwise. And you can figure out where they were. See, he went all the way to the Great Mountains. That's the Blue Ridge from Essex County. You get your militia, county lieutenants, colonels. Watch that one. The colonel usually was an honorary title rather than a military title. You get court martial records sometimes, but very seldom. But you get them appointed. And then roads. They establish routes for new roads. They appoint road gangs and surveyors. They're called road orders usually. The surveyors were not people that went out, with the compass and figured the bounds of something. These were the ones that surveyed. They were in charge of a road gang to keep the road clear. And they were called a surveyor. Now, why? I don't know. They set up road signs. They built bridges. They established ferries. You want the road gangs if they list them. If they don't list them, usually if you go to the newspapers for that time period, what you have is the fact that they will have a little pieces of paper with the road gang on. You know why you want that road gang? In essence, yes, it is. You get the renters as well as the people who were actually owned land, okay? And you guess where they're working the road? Where they lived. Figured they had a vested interest. It didn't work too well, but it was the best they could do. And I always like to show the status of some of the roads back then. This was, and this was a camera shot. So you can imagine what they were 100 years before that. All right. Repairing bridges. So you'll get them through here, and I'm not going to go through the individual, but this is a road game. Okay. We'll do this. All right. Or actually somebody else had platted this land in Orange County. So I knew who the land, I just tracked it forward until I got to the time period, who owned the land at that time. Okay. I knew where the road was roughly. And there are the 3 non-landowning people there that I can now place in that area. 2 of them, by the way, were later sons-in-laws of the Clevelands and the Askews. Grand jury presentments. That's where you get all the neighborhood gossip. All right. Mostly crimes against the community and morality. That's where you get all of the illegitimate children, that sort of thing. You had to serve. All right. They would call you into court and fine you if you didn't. And you get the we present, vagabond, a base-born child. Sometimes they'll actually haul the daddy in if they can get the woman to say who it was and charge him. And then you get the adultery. Terrell was a Quaker, so I strongly suspect that they had been married outside the Episcopal Church, was why this was being brought. But I ran into one time. I had a client come to me and said that, well, they were hauled into court in Kentucky for, not being married, committing adultery. They had 11 kids. She said, I don't understand. And I said, and interestingly enough, one of the members of the county court in Kentucky was one of the kids. But what it turned out to be was they had lived in Southwest Virginia in the 1790s when there were a lot of Indian raids, and there were no ministers in that area. And so they went out and got married, and the charges were dismissed. But it was interesting. I really like the fact that, one of the kids was serving on the court at the time. Okay. If you don't, list yourself and guess that he probably just moved into the county since he was just being placed there. Juries. You get, and the regulations changed over time, but essentially you had to be a property owner and 21 to be on a jury. However, you find it very interesting that the people who were being sued at the time, involved in court suits at the time, a lot of them seemed to be serving on the jury, and some of them I knew darn well didn't have any property. And I finally found the law, and it says that if you put somebody on, they could haul somebody out from court, you had to claim that the person who is on the jury was not qualified to be on the jury before the trial started, or you couldn't question. So, when they didn't have enough legal people, they just called whoever was standing around the court waiting for their trial to come up to be on the jury. All right, witnesses, women could be witnesses. This is one of the things they could do. Unmarried women, either widows or single, who were 21, could own property, could bring suit in court. And you can track, I think the next thing I have, I hope here. This is the one you want. If you lived in the county or the city, you got a flat fee per day for being a witness. Okay, paid for by either the plaintiff or the defendant. Right. If you lived outside of the county or the city, you got mileage and ferriage. So, if you've got, I can say, oh, well, he had a ferry, so he had to live on this side. Won't say where he lived. It's 40 miles, but we're sitting here, in Henrico County, and you got ferries, then they came across the river. So I only look for him there. In West Virginia, I'm sitting here in Monroe County. He got ferried. Well, then he had to live over here because everywhere else there was no river. So I know, again, a direction to go looking for him. And the other half of the coin is also the fact that if he's being a witness for somebody, then he knew them at some point. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a witness, right? So what are the chances if you're trying to track somebody back that that's where you go looking for? Because that's probably where he came from. All right. So what court order books, the information in them is just absolutely fantastic. And those are just other things that pay attention to these things. Usually they did certain things at a certain time of year. Now, and counties vary, but grand juries were supposed to be held twice a year. So once you find the grand jury, then you know we're about to look for it again. Annual budgets once a year, usually in October. Road orders, for whatever reason, I usually find either early spring or late fall. Orphans accounts, they set up, and that depends on the county. But once you find out, figure out what this county does, they tend to do it all the time. So you can limit how much of an order book maybe you have to look at if you're trying to find a particular item. And the other thing you can do is they tend to do marginal notations. So you don't have to read everything on that page because you'd be there half a day. Writing was, well, actually, that's pretty good writing, but even then it's hard. But all you have to do is look here. Well, if I'm not looking for an action of debt. I want a Chancery court case. I can, debt, I read one word. That's all I need. And I can skip to the next one, and the next one's going to be down here. Sometimes a clerk will just use a slash mark, but it sort of does, in most cases, define each item. And so once you've eliminated that because that's not what you're after, then you can move on to the next thing. And you can see here. You can go down through this real quick because guess those are all court cases, and I'm looking for an apprenticeship, that sort of thing. You can see the slash marks there. All right. Trying to figure out what something says can be interesting. How many of you would assume that that was an E? Yeah. Somebody they did, and couldn't figure out, and they tried to make a man's name out of this, Mr. somebody. Go find a word somewhere that has the same form and see what is, and the V is what finally gave the full, because you can pick out something that the only way it makes sense is if it is that particular letter, and then you can start filling it in. But some of the handwriting is something else. I took home a will one time. I made a copy of it off the microfilm. And when I got home, I didn't know which way to try to read it. Okay. So what you can find out even when records are destroyed, and this is going to be my last example until we skip all the way to the end. But most of these are just examples, but I want to tell you about this one. Even though only these records survive and a few other items, I had Mary Rose. I was looking for James Lawrence. She named her son James Lawrence. Had 5 entries for Mary Rose, 1 entry for Mary Lawrence. We went down through, and then there's William Ledford. She was married 3 times. I got all 3 marriages. I got most of the kids. There may have been others, but at least I got the underage ones. And found out that her 3rd husband, I think it was an indentured servant, her indentured servant. So I suspect, anyway. But I actually, even with just those few, I was able to track her for about a 30-year period of time and all of our activities. So even when there are only bits and pieces, a lot of times the order books will take you very far. And his son Lawrence and his daughter Sarah Bishop, and who she married, and so the children of John, and I got the whole family. It was fun. Anyway, we'll go through that. Let's skip down here. Okay, very quickly to the end, because these are just other examples of that. How many of you all are familiar with the work that FamilySearch is doing with, let me see, work that FamilySearch is doing with AI and, okay, all right. So I just got back from Salt Lake Tuesday morning early. And while I was out there, I was out there for a board meeting, so I didn't have time to explore it out there. And when I got home, I didn't have time either. All the stuff that you left undone before you left, and all the stuff. I was only gone 3.5 days. You would think that the world could have survived without, some more disasters. But anyway, so yesterday afternoon, I spent about 30 minutes on this because of what I had heard. And it came with a caveat. Roots Tech in February, when they announced the fact that they were doing the OCRing of the handwritten records, and that wills and deeds were going to be 2 of them. That was where they were starting. And I was at a FamilySearch dinner, and they passed out little notes after the announcement and said, well, what would you like FamilySearch to do next? And everybody at our table all said the same thing: order books, because those are the most difficult to be able to access to get information. And I was out there, and I was told that, they've got order books up now. So I went in. And by the way, if you're interested, this is where you go, FamilySearch.org in labs, okay? And then you sign in. And let me see, I think it's the next screen. You have to have an account, of course. Yeah, you can do the full text search. And these are the collections. And I said, but I heard that they were doing the order books now. Well, apparently they're not announcing that they're doing the order books. But this is the index to your foot suits. This is another one that, and see, I can't see the title up there, but you all can. This is a Monroe County Court order book. And they're apparently doing the ones that are the early ones first, and they're just randomly posting them up. So it's maybe you'll get it, maybe you didn't. I just looked for vines. I knew I was going to get a lot of grapevines, always do, but they in Virginia, so that I could find out what they had. And so what you have, but they had one mislabeled. It was obviously a deed book. Apparently they're just sort of putting them up as they do them, and they're going to wait until they get a bunch of them up before so it's going to be hit or miss. Most of the ones I found were 19th century ones. They didn't seem to have any of the real early ones yet. But, pardon? Well, part of them are typed, but then I copied. Come on, go back. Oh, there you are. See, they're also doing some of the ones that are not typed. So, pretty soon you can actually, I think, find information without having to read the order in minute books page by page by page. Though I highly recommend it. It's just like the census records. See, I started doing research before they had any census index, except the 1881. And I used to take my mother with me. And I'd set her down with the census. The first time I did it, I set her down and she spent the day. And I said, what took you so long? Because she's still in the same county. And she said, well, I had to get everybody. I mean, she got all the cousins because she knew them, all the in-laws. She had everybody. But she was going page by page, and every time she recognized somebody, there it went down. And so you saw the neighborhoods. You saw the interrelationships. Now we just type the name in and we get the page. And we lose a lot because of that. And so if you don't read the order books, you're going to lose a lot. But yeah, I mean, time is also valuable. So, give and take. Maybe when you find something of interest or find out that you've got somebody working in there, you'll sit down and do a little bit more reading. But they're well worth the time and effort. They really are. Okay. All right. And I apologize for running over. But you got 10 minutes, I guess, a break.
I think that we're good.
All right.
Susan, how are we on time?
So if 10 minutes is, I
think 10 minutes will be an adequate break. So
okay.
Let's do that, and we will resume again in 10 minutes.
And I'll try to be good in the end of time for lunch. I like to talk. You may figure that. Okay, now let's see if we can get out of here and get rid of, we can turn.
Well, people are taking their seats. For those who are online, please mute your microphone if it isn't already muted. We really don't really need to know that there's needs to be another load of laundry moved from the washer to the dryer, which most of us do that, but nevertheless, we don't announce it to the world.
I don't mind dogs that bark at squirrels.
Or well, dogs bark at squirrels too. Yes, there's any number of different things that go on. So, and if there are questions, we can ask them toward the end of this session.
What I am going to do is very rapidly go through some of this because it's in essence a repeat of what I've talked about with the order books as far as the way the courts work. So I won't spend a lot of time, and that way I'll save more time for you all to ask questions later, hopefully. I tend, I spent 44 years in the classroom. And the one thing that you learn when you're teaching high school kids, especially boys, is that you do not give them 30 seconds of free time. And so I always talk to the why, but and it's a habit that's hard to break. But anyway, all right, Chancery records in Virginia. And I hope everybody here has Virginia ancestors somewhere along the line. Is there anybody who doesn't? Oh, okay. So So maybe you're lucky. St. Louis, for example, has some of their Chancery records online, and there are a few other people that have them or have published some. Or sometimes the court clerks would actually enter the proceedings in books, and you can get the information that way. Virginia, oh, I don't know, it's probably been 15 years at least ago that, or maybe 20. You know, time sort of compresses when you get my age. And I have to do the math now to figure out how long I've been married. So they got together with the court clerk and association, and they passed a law that said that they added a tax onto every recording of property sales, mortgage, anything dealing with that. So there's this little bit down there that goes to the court clerks. We got it raised recently, so we can do more, but it's all to preserve the records, the local records. And they decided that one of the things that would be very helpful is to digitize the Chancery records. Oh, maybe, is that better? Okay, so I was talking there, and I'll stand back a little bit. Maybe that'll help. Okay, so they decided to do the Chancery records. And they started in getting local people to do it, and they finally brought everything back in house. But essentially, they flat filed the Chancery papers, digitized them, indexed them, and put them online. Now, if they had indexed every name, yeah, we probably have about 15 counties by now. That'd be all. Fredericksburg did. Fredericksburg was one of the pilot programs, and they indexed every name. And they do not have theirs digitized and online, but they have the indexes online. So then you can contact them and pay a fee to get copies, or go there and look at them, either one. But they do have an every name index to all their Chancery records. And so once you look at that, you would see what it would be like, for example, in Augusta County. I'd have to have 2 lifetimes before they'd ever finish. And that's where a lot of my people were at one time or another. So I'll show you later on. I need a lifetime just to read it. Okay, so I've talked about law and Chancery. Law is whatever the law is. Debt, trespass, anything like that. Chancery is a fairness issue. Now, what happens to you sometimes is that you go to a court of law and you lose, because the law says you lose. But that's hardly fair as far as you're concerned. So then you go to Chancery. Okay? And you sue again, and you may win if it really isn't fair. You can't win on a point of law, but you can win on a fairness issue. So that's possible. Always think about that. The reason most people like Chancery records is because of English common law says that you cannot diminish, or said, that you could not diminish the estate of an orphan. It had to be protected. If he inherited 3 cows from his dad, he got 3 cows when he was 21 of the same age. If he owned 100 acres, he got the 100 acres. Now you may see that kid apprenticed out because there was no support. It's a poor child. Yeah, owns 100 acres of land. But 100 acres doesn't give enough rent to support it. And so he's bound out, apprentice, and then when he gets to be 21, he has 100 acres of land. Now, the problem with all of this is daddy dies and there's 1,000 acres of land, or 15 enslaved individuals or whatever, then you can't divide the estate until everybody gets to be 21, by which time one of the siblings is dead and has 10 orphans. And so you got to wait until all 10 orphans, come of age, and you get the idea. So what happens is you go to Chancery court and say, it's not fair to make me wait to get my inheritance. And the court says, yes, you're right. And they appoint a guardian for the property of the underage heirs, and then divide everything up. And the guardian takes care of the underage's property until they reach 21. So that's why you see all of these suits over property, inheritance, mostly in intestate estates, sometimes in intestate estates as well, if somebody didn't do a good job of writing a will. And so people say, boy, this is a really contentious family. Nobody must have liked anybody. But it isn't that. Somebody in the family is sued by somebody else in the family, which means because they're suing to get the inheritance. And it's usually whoever's been appointed administrator. So it's whoever is still in the county, in the area. And then it's known as what we call a friendly court suit. All they want to do is get the chancellor to appoint guardians for the kids that are underage, so we can divide the estate. Okay, so you cannot assume that you've got two people. They may very much be mad at each other, but not necessarily. Okay. All right. So and people ignore the laws because they think it's not useful. It's like this one. It's a suit for debt. The guy owed for some Scots plaid and 7 boys' hats. All right, now we know he's obviously Scottish, right? Well, his last name happened to be Ballard. And there were multiple Ballards in Orange County. 2 with the same name. One of them was Quaker. One of them was a Quaker. Okay. So I get a Revolutionary War pension file. And he says, I and my 6 brothers all served in the Revolutionary War. All right. 2 points. One, you're not going to usually find, though you do find some Quakers serving in the war. Okay. And they would serve as wagon masters or wheelwrights or whatever. But when you've got this guy and 6 brothers and you got 7 boys' hats, you're pretty sure that you're dealing with the Scottish William Ballard and not the Quaker William Ballard. So law can sometimes also provide you with those connections. And I always want to point this out. You don't ignore the law cases. You look at them to see if they can provide useful information. Sometimes they can. All right, so the parties and their relationships are either stated or implied. And this is a problem, and I'll show you in a minute why it's a problem. It's a fairness issue. You have a lot of intestate estates, and you have underage or missing. Somebody went west and was never heard of again. So you get those too, so they want the estate. As I mentioned earlier, you get the plaintiff and the defendant index, and that's it. And it's usually the first party in the list who may be a son-in-law. You never know. And I showed you this one earlier because it's my favorite one, since it's one where it's the wrong party. So we'll just skip over that. All right. And then you get Terry versus Knight. We'll go back here. Manuel Terry, Nancy, his wife, late Nancy Oakes, and then you go down. But a lot of times they don't tell you unless, but the thing that I want to mention here is if you get, notice you've got Henry Oakes and Reuben Oakes. Well, yeah, they're Oakes, but sometimes you will actually get somebody that doesn't have a wife and doesn't have a last name of the intestate. And so you wonder why he's there. And that's probably because he has surviving children from a deceased wife. And so he's representing those surviving children. Now, he should be listed as a guardian, but sometimes he's not. So, okay. And then you go on down. And in this case, they are not inhabitants of the commonwealth. Now, George H.S. King was a well-known genealogist who lived in Fredericksburg. And he used those Fredericksburg court papers a lot because he knew what was in them, and he was friends with the court clerk, and nobody else got to look at the papers. But he was in Orange working for a client on this one. And this is the point I want to make, is you don't just work, I mentioned this before, you don't just work on the person that you're trying to track, or even the siblings in the person you're trying to track, or the in-laws in the person you're trying to track. You also track the neighbors, because that's where you a lot of times get little pieces of information that will tell you. There's one that I always loved in Orange, and it was a suit over land. You know, did the property line go to this creek or that creek? And the guy comes in court and he says, well, it goes to the oak tree, and that oak tree was right beside the schoolhouse, which was on this creek. And so now I know that there was a 1740 schoolhouse in Orange County in the area that I am tracking an individual. And so you get those pieces of information as well. So you want to follow the neighbors to, especially when they're nice thick ones, because you know that you're getting a lot of depositions and not just a few subpoenas. And I think I've got next, without a split screen, I can't tell what's coming next, so you'll forgive me. They're not connected. Oh no, well, it'll come up a little bit later. Okay, this is, and it's in your handout, this is, I think, page 3, and they're still listing parties to the suit. And it's not very large handwriting, okay? What had happened, this is why you need to pay attention in Chancery. So the Clarks lived on Clark's Mountain in Orange County. One of the Clarks moved over to Madison County, an adjacent county. He married very late in life, a young thing, and had no children. She got everything for her life. That was his will. He left a will. She got everything for life, and it was supposed to be divided among his brothers and sisters. Well, by the time she died, all the brothers and sisters were dead, and some of their kids were dead, leaving heirs. And so that's why, and there were, I think it was 11 siblings originally. So you can see why you have 4 pages of suit. Now, if this one showed up in the newspaper, they would just list the names. And then you would have to do your best to figure out who belonged to which group and so on, because that's all you get. Okay. Now, I told you the Library of Virginia has the Chancery Records Index. And now I'm going to tell you the bad news. They are redoing the website. And I do not mean small little changes. We got a new state librarian. If I had known this was going to happen, I would have started writing my book a lot sooner, because I am now trying to figure out how to cite all the things that I'm trying to cite in the Library of Virginia's website when they change it the next time I go in to look, and it's somewhere else, or it's not there at all. They're taking some stuff down. So far, the Chancery Records Index is staying on Virginia memory. I can't even get them to guarantee that Virginia memory is still going to be there. They've got a digital collections discovery section now, and I've got a feeling it'll probably be moved over there. So what I'm going to tell you is that what I highly recommend is, if you can't find what you're looking for, you do one of two things: pick up the phone and call archives, the state library main reference desk, and they'll point you in the right direction. Or you can, you know how you always get that Google search on the first page? You can, but you probably will get a lot of hits. So the quickest way would be call the main desk if you can't find it. Hopefully they can. 277,000 cases, 12.5 million images. Okay. And they don't have them all. They still have, I think, I emailed Scott and asked, and he said, well, the reason we don't have them is because the clerks won't let us have them. So, yeah. So there are some counties that are not there. All right, but most of them are. If they have surviving records, there are some counties like Buckingham that essentially have nothing before 1865. So we go back up to here again. Oh no, I got to find that. There. Yeah. Okay. So search the index will get you to the search page, which we'll go to in a minute. I always recommend search tips, because this is a literal search. In other words, if you type in SMITH, you will not get, in all probability, SMYTH. Okay. Now, typically, though I won't guarantee it here, I just try everything. SMITH will get you SMITHE. So I think it works on this one. I just try everything. Doesn't work. I know I'm supposed to find some Smiths. So this one over here, there used to be a section that had, this is just facts. Okay. So if you go to facts and click on it, keep switching back and forth here. There is a section at the very top of the facts that talks about what a Chancery case is and the types, the things that you will find in the Chancery case. And then what some of the more common abbreviations are. And then if you scroll on down, then you get all the way down to here. So I've covered that up now. It's about the third or fourth question. Anyway, there's something that says, what's available. All right. And so you will get this. And this will tell you what is in the particular collection. You know, the date range that they have done, whether or not it's a digital image. There are a few microfilm images. I meant to look that up. I've got that part written already. But there are still a few that are microfilm. I think Chesterfield is still viewable only at the Library of Virginia, so you'll see that sort of thing. But most of them you see scanned, original, scanned. Most of them have been scanned in now. So you'll get that. Then, if you go to the index, You pick the county or city. They have both, okay? I never use these two up here, plaintiffs or defendants, because I want anybody who's listed. Now, the problem is this is not an every name index. Okay, you can imagine 12 point, how many million images? So maybe eventually they'll partner with FamilySearch and we'll get everything. But until they do, this is only parties, all of the parties. In other words, every one of those Clarks and all their Bootons and everybody they married into is in the index, all 4 pages of that court suit. Okay. Anybody who gave an affidavit or a deposition is listed. But that's about it. Now, they have added something new recently, case referencing enslaved individuals, case referencing free persons. It doesn't seem to work too well. Well, let me rephrase that. I pulled up a case I wanted to use as an example. It did mention enslaved individuals in it. And then when I came back and searched the county, and it didn't show up at that point. So it's not perfect. It may show some, but it's not perfect. Okay. So, when you do this, I selected with county and I put my corpers in because that would be a limited search. Well, it really was a limited search. I got one letter. But if you notice, I've got mine covered up over here. But the 2 parties that are suing each other are neither one of them corpers. So I've got somebody who gave the deposition, okay, in the court case, which is always more, since that's who I was after. You know, if I just searched up there and plaintiff and defendant, I wouldn't have gotten this guy. So that's why I always go down here, because you get the plaintiffs, you get everybody if you're down here. Okay. The parties to the suit, those making definitions. Now, once you get this here, you double click on the title and it will take you to this page. And this is everybody that's listed in this court case. In other words, they gave depositions, all right, or affidavits, or they were parties to the suit. And those are the only 2 that are parties to the suit. There are 158 pages. And you get to download them a page at a time. Isn't that fun? Wait till you see my court case. I complained years ago, and they realized. So they also have an ability, and it didn't take them too long to do it. An ability to download a zip file of the whole court case. And then I just go in with Adobe and say, you know, combine the whole thing, and I get a PDF file that lets me just page through it. Pay attention to the number of the PDF, because that way, if you want to go back and look at it again or whatever, you can just pick the page that you want, type the page in down here and just pull up that one page. If you want to, you know, it's not really real legible in the PDF, and I want to put it on my screen and magnify it as much as I can to see if I can see it better, which happens sometimes. Okay, zip file, number of pages. Are there plats? If they're plats, you'll get a picture of the plat. I did that for one county. I wanted everybody in the county who had a plat, because I was platting land in the county. It wouldn't let me do that. They wanted me to put something else in. So open with Adobe is the default way. I think you can also get a tip. I always do PDF, so I can't tell you for sure. But you can download it a page at a time if you want. You know, that's up to you. 6 pages I usually do. But anyway, now Okay, so this is always page 1, is the file folder, which is written in pencil, and it did not, I mean, most of them are very difficult to read, which is why you have all these transcriptions. All right. You get the title of the case and the parties involved. You get the actual file number, 18027-047 Superior Court, SC. Okay. Most of them don't have the letters at the end. You get wherever it's filed. This is box 38. This is a much more, some of these file folders in some counties have essentially the surnames, maybe the type of suit it is, and the information across the front, and that's it. But this one tells you quite a bit. Say, and this is the one because it says that it is a suit of debt and it involves enslavement, right? So I went back and put it in with a little box click, and it didn't show up. But I don't know why. Maybe this was just one that I missed. But it also tells you the Superior Court of Chancery. Look at this. Dallas County. We're in Witt. Right? It's a Superior Court. That is an upper level appeals court. And so it's made up of X number of counties. Remember when I showed you the example of Augusta? So you need to know which courts are in, which counties or cities are in which courts. So you'll know to go search, for example, Franklin County was a district court. Has Bedford in, for example. I don't know them all off the top of my head. But it's hard to come by information. If you go to a VGS conference, you can buy a little thin court booklet that has them all listed. They don't have it on I meant to ask Teresa and I forgot. I don't think they didn't used to have it listed on the webpage because they don't charge that much for it. And by the time they do the packing, pay the fulfillment people their part and pay the postage, all of that is more than the book. So it's just a little thing. But it does give you all the different courts in the counties that are in it and so on. I'm putting it in my book too, simply because it's so hard to find. The library did have it in one of their publications, but that particular publication is now out of print. So it's, like I said, I've run across it somewhere else, but and if you want to track it in the laws, you can eventually, whenever they establish the courts, you can do it that way too. Now, I also failed to check this, but they used to have a nice little handout on research notes that you could get, but a lot of these research notes have disappeared. So it may or may not. You can try, the first part of the webpage, research notes number 22, and see what happens. A lot of the information is in the facts page now, so you probably won't miss too much of it. All right. So typically a case file has what's known as a bill. And usually they don't mention a plaintiff because they talk about an orator or an oratrix, depending on the sex. The declaration, sometimes it's called a declaration rather than a bill, or a petition, being three. Usually that is the first thing that you will see after that file folder when you download, but sometimes they were digitized differently and you have to go find it somewhere in the case file. The docket is usually, when you originally saw all of these, they were trifold. And on the outside of it, you would see the style of the suit, and then you would see all the dates it was in court. So you could track it. And believe me, some of these things lasted 10 or 15 years. There is one that we will get to that lasted from 1740s to 1903. My ancestor. Supreme Court twice. But anyway, so commissioners' appointments and report. Now, the problem is most of the time you will not see the outcome of the suit in those digitized files. You're going to have to go to the order book. Okay. So you need that ended date. Now, luckily, they do the year, the ended year is going to be part of the file name. It's going to be the first 4 digits of the file name. So at least you can limit yourself there. But you need to look to see, you know, when did the case finally end. So you want to pay attention. Most people skip over that docket, and that's not, you know, smart. Okay. Get depositions, affidavits, exhibits, and that can be wills, deeds, accounts, you know, anything. Subpoenas, bonds, people have to post, commissioners' appointments, because the decree will, you know, appoint somebody to divide everything. All right. So you get the answer of Reuben Daniel, defendant, to the bill of complaint. And he'll say that it is true. And usually the answers, especially in friendly suits, will say, you know, I agree, yada, 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 but I reserve, you know, and I'm the lawyerese for protect yourself. Don't give anything away. Okay. And then you get the Reuben Daniel married Arthur Montague. Arthur was the widow of Peter Montague. She died about 10 years after they were married. Peter died intestate, left 2 daughters. How old they were when he died. Okay. Thomas was the brother. He came to live on the plantation. James married Elizabeth, daughter of Peter. He paid part of Elizabeth's maintenance with the cattle. That was the guy who married the widow. And so he said, that's why she doesn't have a cow now. And the husband is suing for the cow. She's supposed to have the cow. I want the cow. You know, son-in-laws are really, you know, cause a lot of these suits. So the docket, Daniel versus Daniel in Chancery, September 1837. You get summons. Pay attention to who is being ordered to get whom, because it may be somebody who's out of the county. Right? That's the first entries. All right. Pay attention to the back. Executed with his father's security. Doesn't name the father, but somewhere there's a bond with daddy's name on it, citing this suit, and you got dad. It's a little work, but finding daddy is usually a little work. Finding mommy is impossible. All right, the early ones frequently give you your age, where it's going to be taken. They ask questions. You know, you get this sort of there. This is the one that he goes through and gives some of the information in the Daniel suit. He explains why there wasn't anything left. And we go on with that, but we've got very few minutes left. So here you get an age 60 odd, he's not sure. He just loved these. But later on, they just say of age, you know, so you don't get that. And then you get really great arguments. What I want to tell you about this. So William Johnson was born in 1763. He's now 48. His father married in 1772. They're trying to decide whether he was of age or not when he died, because that determined how the property descended. And there's a lot of And of course, Hanover County's burned, so anything like that. And Hawkins just, he was ordered in 1776, 1779, and go on. But this is the part I like. The whole thing, not interested in any of it, don't know any of these people at all. This is the only piece of paper in Orange County, so far as I know, and I'm pretty familiar with Orange County papers, that tells you who Elijah Morton's, who George Morton's father was. And there are lots of Mortons in Orange County. Only place you will find that. So anyway, okay, let us, you get depositions, they give you various, that's the one about school. They were arguing over where a line was, and it depended on who won, who got the town of Orange. Taylor won and Baylor lost. So that's Zachary Taylor's family. And that's just all the information there. So you again, plats, deeds, wills, store accounts, receipts, letters, Bible records. This is the plat where they were trying to figure out where the line was. And you see the piece of property that they were arguing over. It depended on where the tree was by the school, You will also find references to Chancery suits and to things that are no longer there. They were borrowed. I had an ancestor who lifted because it had his ancestor's signature. And so he just took them and put in his papers. My ancestor too. But luckily, his papers went to another researcher, and that researcher's papers went to the West Virginia State Archives. So it's back in, secure hands again. Attorneys are not always lawyers. Next, friends, we talked about, so we won't do that. Check your order book entries, check for deeds of sale, check for newspaper ads, check for plats of division of land. Your commissioner's report, like I mentioned, is going to be in the, yeah, I know, I got 3 minutes. And you see it here, and there it is, the order from the commissioner. All right. Oh, I do. Oh, we won't go so fast then. Goody. Okay, so this is what you get in the order book typically. And you love the court clerk that wrote the date across the top of every page. About 1 out of every 100 court clerks did that. So, at a quarterly court continued, with the County of Orange, Faulkner versus Faulkner in Chancery, the commissioners having made their report by which it appears that the bonds in their hands cannot be divided. They're too small. So they're ordered to sell the bonds and then divide the amount of the sale amongst the many heirs. And you get another one here for the commissioners to sell and distribute. And most often, a lot of times, if it's not underage heirs, it's because the estate is so small that it can't be reasonably divided. We got 12 kids in 100 acres. Or 50, some sense. So you will see that as well. Sometimes you get this. And when that happens, all of the kids get together and sell the property themselves. Now you can tell right away, see, it's a Clark, not a Sparks or a Garden. So all these wives. Sometimes, though, all you will get is Henry Sparks and Lucy, his wife. They won't get the formally in there. Most of the time, they do put the formally in if it's her land, not his. And there again, same thing. Now you will sometimes see this, the executor of said Belfield case, and in his own right. So he's one of the heirs because he is a party to the suit twice. One, he's named the executor, and two, he is one of the heirs. So he is a party twice, is what's going on there. I think this is the one, let's see. Yes. And then you get this. Valentine Johnson, surviving husband, wife is dead, of Eliza, formerly Eliza Cade, deceased. Now, why is he here? One of two reasons. Either there are children, and he's representing them, though it shouldn't say that, okay? Or she was alive when daddy died. So she has an inheritance vested in her. And they have children, even if they're now dead, all they had to do was be born alive, survive 30 seconds. Then he has rights for life to that property. Or if it's on his personal property, it's his. Because he got women in Virginia, 1887, 82, somewhere along about there, before women had property rights. The first ones in the United States, I think, was Mississippi in 1840, early 1840, when and that was an Indian woman who precipitated all of that, because women owned all the property in most Native American families. All right. Then you see down here Francis and Emily, infants by their guardian and next friend. You run into sometimes, anytime you see a deed that says et al. On it, I'm like King was with the big packets of paper. Whenever I see a name I'm interested in with et al. After it, I go read the deed, even if that first name is of no interest to me, because it means that there are other names in the deed. Okay. And then you see, and the reason they're having a court suit is somebody went west and was never heard of it. Right. Now, this is what I'm talking about here. This is one of those Boonton, it was part, those suits went on forever too. But if you notice, there are no relationships necessarily mentioned. They just list names. And so as a result of that, and it often happens, they'll say administrator or in his own right, but then you list all these names and they'll list the kids because they're the heirs. They don't list the relationship of how they're the heirs. You just got to figure it out, unless they're all shinks or, obviously a single family. And that's what you get. You get, I showed you this one earlier. I always love this because this is in a very badly burned record county in Virginia. And you get the names of the landowners, adjacent landowners. Also, I think this one's one that says that our property is up there, that piece up there, and name the wife. Right. And I've explained this. Superior Court of Chancery, again, watch those superior courts. Those are appeal courts. Your orators, Elijah McClanahan, is suing the Evans. And some people skip over that. Here's the only place the relationship is mentioned in that entire suit. Peter Evans, the father of the said William Thomas, and because they're the ones, William and Thomas and Joseph were the kids, and they were the ones that were bringing the suit. So they're mentioned. But in the declaration, their dad is mentioned because he was doing the explaining how the property came to him. And so it's always wise to read everything. Okay. Find out he did not have an overseer, got his washing paid. I love that. How far away his house was. McClanahan had a mill, also was a distiller as well. Well, how did you rent? I mean, you get all of this information. How far these people lived from each other. It's fascinating. Now, some of them are very boring, I'll admit, but I get lost in just reading all the details. And this guy was a joiner. You know what a joiner is? Carpenter. Okay. All right. And then the last one that I want to mention. I happen to be related to the Bordens, the Carpers. And there is a reference to part of a Virginia Supreme Court case who mentions the fact that one of Benjamin Borden, in the Valley of Virginia, Benjamin Borden, who owned 10,000 acres in the Valley of Virginia, and he left each one of his children, all of whom except one is underage, 1,000 acres of land, which is no problem, right? Except he said 1,000 acres of good contiguous land. Young son has to try to keep title with that, which means that he guaranteed bringing in so many settlers within a certain amount of time. So he's selling land wherever he can sell it. Comes down to it, he dies, gets the measles and dies. And there's not enough land left. Well, rather, some of the son-in-laws argue over that too. That's good land that is also contiguous land. I mean, there was enough acreage left, but well, that's a stone outcrop over there. I don't want it. Top of the mountain, I can't get there. So the heirs sued some of the people who had bought the land. My ancestor was a carpenter. He's described in the Supreme Court records as an illiterate old German. He might have been illiterate in English, but he could sign his name. And he wasn't exactly dumb. They sold out. Everybody else lasted to 1903. They sold out. Well, they decided they didn't want it. So they wanted to buy it. So they took it to court, ended up at the Supreme Court, said that, well, the guy came and got us drunk. Well, Supreme Court bought it. Okay, you get the land back. About 3 years later, they tried the same trick. Supreme Court didn't buy it that time. So anyway, so I had to do my own work to prove my family. Everybody else's is in. They actually had a file cabinet full of this court case at the Augusta County Court. And the reason why is because of all the suits and countersuits over, old Ben Borden died in 1743. 1903, do the math. Okay. Those are all the parties. Well, not really. It says, see also this other court suit. Okay. 1 will, 2 account settlements, 9 flats, and that doesn't, some of the little countersuits aren't even counted. Oh, yeah, it's the bottom. You see down here? 1,649 pages, and no, I haven't read it all yet. I'm working, but too many other things keep taking over my life. But it's just the wealth of material that you can find in these Chancery records is absolutely fantastic. That's not to say that FamilySearch really gets their act together and gets all those order and minute books, translated, transcribed, OCR, whatever. Somebody asked me, because I've been working in some of them, and they said, well, how good is it? I said, well, you've used newspaper OCR, haven't you? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, it's about equal to that in most cases. I mean, you know, but there's enough of it there until you can figure it out, usually, not always. But it's just, you know, it's like when we got the census digitized and indexed. That was a, you know, a fantastic boon to researchers. The same thing's going to happen with the order and minute books as more and more of these records become available online and you can get to them. I suspect a lot of people are going to be rewriting a lot of their family history, quite frankly. But it's like DNA. You know, a lot of people are already rewriting their family history. Well, there are going to be a lot more before it's ever. But it's a lot of fun. And I highly recommend it. And I've got 4 minutes for questions. None? Yes. Oh, yeah. St. Louis has, oh, okay. She wants to know if other places have much the same thing as far as Chancery records are concerned. Yes, they do. I give essentially the same lecture sometimes nationwide. And I use Virginia because I've got the samples right there. But I also deleted some clips where St. Louis, for example, has early, I mean, we're talking the 1700s again, Chancery records online there and available. The indexes, you know, it depends. Some people have actually had in Virginia before this indexed, been transcribed or abstracted Chancery records and published them. So you'll find those as well. You'll also find that even Virginia has some Chancery order books that are essentially transcripts of the loose papers. See, the Chancery court was before a chancellor. After the revolution, well, once they set up a separate Chancery court in 1835, it was totally judges. And so what you had was 1835. I get my centuries mixed up. And so I wrote a check the other day for 18 and something. But anyway, they didn't like it. What they did was, you know, the depositions and the affidavits, it won't have the subpoenas and that sort of thing in it, but they will actually, you know, are books, Chancery orders that will have the depositions and the final things. And you'll find those in some places as well. So that's it's, but usually I put in, and I did not put it in, maybe it's in your handout, the Herndon suit, because it's, I did that one in the magazine of Virginia Genealogy. I had corresponded with a lady who was chasing Herndons. There are Herndons in Virginia that they're a mess. I straightened out a couple of the lines and I'm working on a third. But she happened to be at the Library of Virginia one day when I was there, and she came back and she said, "Oh," she said, "I found a Herndon court suit in Kentucky." And I said, "Oh," I said, "You solved your problem?" She said, "No, it wasn't my family." She said, "But papers were in the basement. It's over 100 pages." And I said, "Oh." I said, "I wonder if I can find some." I said, "What county is it? I wonder if I can find somebody maybe, you know, would like to go in and look search." She said, "Oh, I made a copy of the whole thing and took it out." She said, "I've transcribed part of it." And so I said, "Ooh." And I said, "How would you like to get it published?" So she sent me the abstracts from the records and I published it in the magazine. But that one had, he died in 1835 in Caroline County, burned. His will is in there. tracks all of his kids because the family moved along with the widow en masse to North Carolina. Then one or two moved to Georgia. Another one moved to Tennessee. And then two or three others moved to Kentucky. And that's where the court suit ended up, because this actually it wasn't the son-in-law, it was the grandson-in-law, I guess you would say, who sued about one of the widow's dower slaves. And it went all the way, it had to go to Kentucky to sue, and all the papers are there. And then it also included two Kentucky wills that, of course, were not from Bradford County. But it's just, you never know where you're going to find him. And this was in the early 1800s. The guy died in 1735. So this is the thing, and you'll hear this repeated time after time after time after lunch. People should not set artificial boundaries of time or place. It'll get you every time. It'll get you every time. And you'll see plenty of examples. And maybe that's where I put the 100 will, which is why I didn't put it in. Short-term memory loss. And I forget what I've done. So, one chapter. Okay.
It's lunchtime. I know it happens back there where I see turkey and ham and something else, probably veggie. And the folks back there, somebody appear in the window and give me the high sign that you're good to go. Are you good to go? Okay. Enjoy your lunch. We resume at, 1 o'clock? Okay, wonderful.
Okay. So Shirley came up and said, you need to tell them about your book, because I don't think they know. And you may not. You saw me hobbling a few minutes ago. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to continue lecturing. My knees are starting to remind me of how old I am. I did 18 straight sessions at GRIP this year. I don't think I'll try that one again. But I spent, and I didn't realize until the other day, I went back to one of the first chapters. I spent the last 4 years working on getting what I've talked about for years into print form. If nothing else happens in my life this year, I hope to have it, finished before Christmas. If I don't have it finished before Christmas, I probably will be unmarried by the first of the year. But it is what it is. Now, what you're going to hear for the next hour is me preaching. And I'm pretty good at that. I spent too many years trying to preach to teenage boys that English is good for you. The only time they really believed me was when I was teaching Macbeth with all the blood and guts. I played the witch. So I really did. I was called the witch at the high school. And when my nephew, my great nephew, went to school there, I said something, did they ever teach you about it? He said, no. Said, but they asked me if you really were a witch. And I said, well, what'd you tell him? Well, I told him I didn't know whether you were or not, but you had a big black pot on the front porch. I had been to an antique store. My husband no longer takes me to antique stores. He figured he wouldn't be asked to buy 2 iron pots, but the second map I bought at an antique store, I no longer got to go into an antique store until he had checked out, and made sure there were no maps, because he knew if there were, he would leave owning one. So anyway, it just reminded me of my grandmother, when I was growing up eons ago, She was still down at the spring with an iron pot up on over a fire, heating, boiling her clothes. And then, because she didn't trust newfangled things, her sons had bought her a gas-powered washing machine. So she'd boil them first, and then she put them in the washing machine. So anyway, okay, so we are going to talk about looking everywhere. How many of you all have looked everywhere? Yeah, that's right. That's what happens with my glasses and my car keys. I've looked everywhere. And Bobby, they're right over there. So anyway. Well, we do have problems. There are records that no longer survive, and Virginia has more than enough of those. And there are a lot of records that don't give us the answer, or at least don't give us the answer we want. They may give us an answer. It's usually no. So best choice, you either follow the event, you follow the document, or you follow the person. Because there are always documents. You know, well, marriage register doesn't have marriage. There's the church register. There are church rolls out there that I've run across more than once. People ignore church rolls. Secretary makes marginal notations when the girl marries. And you get at least you get the surname she married. Okay. The minister has his own little black book. And of course, he ended up retiring 4 states away. And guess where the little black book is? If you're lucky. There are marriages for Rockingham, a burned record county, if she didn't know. Rockingham County in Monroe County, West Virginia, because that's where the Reverend John Alderson ended up. And he started out in Rockingham County. Minister's autobiographies sometimes tell stories about some of the marriages that he performed. Church histories will reference him on occasion. Sometimes tombstones will give a maiden name, or they'll be buried next door. You get newspaper announcements, social columns, so-and-so came home for the wedding of. You get court suits, because maybe she's giving testimony and she's explaining how. I even found a pension file. Woman was attesting to the fact that, and this is during a time period, you know, Virginia doesn't have a whole lot of pre-Revolutionary War marriage registers. And here she was attesting to the soldiers because I was in my father's tavern, which she named in the town. And you found out who she is because now she's married. And she's given daddy's name. Letters, diaries. There was one posted, and I didn't download it at the time. And I've kicked myself ever since. I finally got it. If I find it, I keep it. The last computer I had, I went to 8 terabyte hard drives. I use a RAID because I don't take enough time to back up my stuff. Microsoft says, oh boy, back up your computer. We'll give you 52 megabytes. I'm thinking, I'm sitting here on an 8 terabyte. I wonder how much that would cost. But it was a Gen web page. And online, and a woman, somebody had posted this letter. And it was in Southwest Virginia. And she was writing somewhere, may have been Wythe County. Somewhere down in that area anyway. She was writing her son in Tennessee. And she said, oh, by the way, so-and-so got married to that Kentucky drover the other day. And It was a guy who was driving, I don't know what, I've been told they even drove turkeys all the way up the road to Philadelphia. Well, if you clip their wings, they can't fly. So now who is going to look for a man who lives in Kentucky, married halfway between, Kentucky and Philadelphia? But there it was. And I bet nobody will ever find him. Well, I don't guess it was me. Deeds, you can change your title back to the original patent or grant sometimes. You've got plats, surveys, surveyor notes. And the one thing I find about deeds is that a lot of times, if you got this piece of land, you don't know where you got it, you track it forward, not back. Because one or two transfers later, somebody gets a little bit nervous about the title to the land, when and so they'll give you a chain of title for 3 or 4, sometimes all the way back to the patent. Well, I got it from so and so, who got it from so and so, who got it from so and so, who got it from so and so. Oh, that's her grandfather. Oh, and so annotated maps, plat maps, the one I showed you earlier, remember where I told you it named all the neighbors? Like pretty colored one. And by the way, that's posted online at the Library of Virginia. Somebody just found it. There's a whole story behind me getting that one too. Tax lists, delinquent tax lists, advertisements of sale in the newspaper, court suits, estate records, historic building files. The WPA historic building files quite frequently will have a little section on it that give the history of a particular property. And road or internal improvements, where you get the map where they're going to turn the road this way, or they're going to dredge the river or whatever, and it will list the properties along the side. Some of them are really, I found one once where we're doing this, and the guy who drew the thing even drew the trees along the side of the roadway and the shadow of the trees, so you could tell the direction that he was looking at when he did the plat. Some of them are real arts, they really are. You follow the people, ancestry, descendants, siblings, including half siblings, and we'll look at examples of these: step parents, step siblings, in-laws, neighbors, associates, church, fraternal, work related, military, officials. Now, this is one some people miss. I hadn't been doing research that long, and a guy came to me. He had a family that was in Culpeper County, and they were relatively poor people. And he was trying to connect them to this family of the same name in Spotsylvania County. That's where they came from. But he had been argued out of it because they said, well, he was, too young to have been the father of these kids. Well, I couldn't find him. So I finally ended up going to the Virginia Historical Society, which is now the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I always get the last word wrong. Because the magazine is the Virginia Magazine of History and Biography, so I keep trying to put biography on that. But anyway, nothing. I mean, because they've got Bible records there and a number of things that can be very interesting. And I recognized the name of one of the JPs in the area that this guy was living in Spotsylvania. So I thought, well, I'll just look and see what's there. I always like to look at manuscript collections. And I got it out. And I should have known. because he was literate, of course. And where do people go to get things done? Justice of the peace, quite often. And there, amongst his letters and everything else, receipts, I mean, it was a jumble. Was one little piece of paper about 3 by 5. And it was a bond for a copy of it. And it was a bond for this guy in question. And it was dated. And of course, you can't go security on a bond or sign a bond or a contract, a legally binding, put it that way, until you're 21. And I'm sitting there and doing the math. And I said, well, yes, he could have, because he was about 15 years older than everybody else thought he was. And so, and totally unrelated manuscript collection, you would say, but it wasn't, because this was going to be the local secretary to have, a quarter of the county. And now I don't start there. There's no index. I'm not going to start there, but when I run out of other things, I haven't run out yet until I look at that too. Then you look for ideas. You read other people's research. See what they searched for and what they found. I read the footnotes a lot of times and never read the article. You read state, regional, and local histories. Okay? Because they talk about collections, they have articles on, they reference, and they also tell you about new ones that somebody just found that you didn't know about. Then I go back and I make a list of everything. I have a bibliography on every county in Virginia, in West Virginia. Locate WPA inventories and collections. So I'm writing the book, and I'm going to put WPA material in it. And it's not going to be as extensive as I thought, because I'm running out of page counts. But it'll be enough to get you started, because the library has an inventory, a partial inventory at the library that you can look at. But they have online at the Library of Virginia the house histories that the WPA did. Okay, they republished the WPA history travel log of the state that a lot of WPAs did. They've got a number of copies of the WPA lists of church records and that sort of thing. And I think it's 6 or 7 county inventories. They've got, I've forgotten how many hundred boxes over at the State Records Center. They've got transcripts of county records. They've got a plethora. Tennessee published all of the WPA transcripts of the order and minute books that they had. Virginia's are over at the Record Center in boxes. So that's it. It's typewritten, a lot easier to read than those old minute books. So if you decide, you might want to check that inventory to see if they did when for that particular time period that you're interested in. And I was telling somebody about this. A lot of people are not aware of the fact that the national park is always telling you about the parks, and they'll tell you about people and events there. They actively collect everything that they can find: letters, diaries, official records, everything that they can about the time period and the place for their various parks. And they have research libraries set up with material in them, and they are available to the public. Notice I did not say open. I said available. You usually have to make an appointment. And you may find that this park's material is at that park. You know, in other words, they may have 2 or 3 collections at a larger park where they would have better facilities. We have a, should I say, infamous park in Virginia. Pardon? Shenandoah. And the people that were forced out from there, it's probably been 10 years now. But somebody finally got mad and had discovered that when everybody left and they were going through the houses and cleaning everything out and so on, they collected all the books and letters and diaries and Bibles and everything and took them and stored them in one of the facilities there. And they refused to admit that they were there and refused to let anybody look at it. So he filed a FOIA, went to court. They're now accessible. And they tell a lot about the people who lived up there. But that's one of the things, that's an area because, you know, you can easily access most of the court records that you would find, the land records, anything like that. But they work at getting letters and diaries. And they even have people donate to them simply because, you know, this is where their ancestor fought or whatever. And so they have these things and they'll give them to the Park Service. So if you've got an interest in the area or in people who served or fought in a particular area, it's well worth, you know, talking to them. And it's not just there. For example, the park over in Stanton that has, you know, the Irish village and the German village, and they have an extensive library over there where they have been researching the backgrounds of the various ethnic groups that came and settled, you know, in that area. So not only do you have replica buildings, but you also have a large collection of information about the type of people and how they lived and so on. So it's a rich resource that most of us don't tap like we should. And then they have something even better. I stumbled on this one. The Park Service regularly publishes. If you want to know who lived in Jamestown and where their house was situated, I think it's 4 volumes. They talk about the buildings, the houses, who lived in them, who they sold them to, what they did, you know, the whole thing. PDF download. And they have a whole series of publications on various things that they published over the years that can be extremely useful. And you want to look at geographic items, you know, when they talk about a particular place, it may mention someone. When they talk about people, they also mention people that live near them, associated with them, a storekeeper that they purchased from, whatever. And as I said, public officials, political officials, you never know. And of most importance. Well, I mean, you know, we tend to think that we have everything that survives for, let's say, King and Queen County. But we don't. There's still places out there that have things that you know, nobody is aware of. Was it just came in the other day that somebody was telling me about? What was it? In the past 10 years, we've gotten the Chesterfield, not Chesterfield, what is it? Well, now I can't remember him. But an order book, we've gotten, you know, letters and things that have come in. People turn in up a diary. No collection remains static because new things, new old things can be added. Okay, right? We're not interested in new. Okay, well, yes, we are. But and I should include Facebook because I was working for a client. We turned out to be related on at least 3 different lines. However, the interesting part about it was is we went up this one to the last known ancestor. I went up this way. We never meet in any of the situations until we get all the way to the last one. But she was out there because I don't spend much time on Facebook or any time really. And she sent me, she says, "Oh, I found the Bible." Skaggs Bible. And she met with a person in McDonald's. I've got copies of the picture. And took pictures of the Skaggs Bible. The last page was missing. I was related through the oldest daughter. She was related through the youngest daughter. So hers wasn't there, but mine was. So I thanked her nicely. But you know, you do. There was a barn down in one of the southeast counties, maybe Southampton, where a well-known former researchers' papers were, and are now in a historical society. There's a school record that you'll meet later in an attic in Monroe County. Frequently find things posted on eBay. In fact, the Library of Virginia has somebody regularly checking to make sure that there are no Virginia documents that are, you know, still considered state property. I mean, they try to be nice about it. They'll even sometimes pay a little fee or get a donor too, but legally they could sue. Courthouse steeples. I think that was Accomack County. You can imagine the heat and humidity over there. Amherst was a window seat. Somebody decided to reupholster a window seat in the clerk's office. And so they took the top off and it was full of court records. A closet in Greenbrier County. They had the minister's returns. They had none of the bonds or permission slips. They were on the top shelf of the closet that nobody had looked at for 200 years. New Jersey, an institution in New Jersey's in the Library of Virginia, a record book that they found in their collection that they didn't know they had. I mean, they show up everywhere. And then there's the other half that you would like, because institutions keep trying to, I mean, you know, I will tell you, I put a caveat in the book. I said, the Library of Virginia knows what it has to at least the box level. Banker's box level, filled with file folders, filled with packets of papers. I ordered one down because it had, I was looking for it at the time. I think it mentions hidables maybe. And I found 2 or 3. The rest of the box was filled with other things. Now they've done the Chancery records at Augusta County. So I was out there looking at some of the law records because it was a law case I was trying to get. Yeah, I'm going through the law cases. Oh, this is a Chancery case. Oh, that's a Chancery case. Somebody put in the wrong box. You never know what you're going to find. And then some people actually actively are out there. I think somebody told me just today about working on indexing material in Prince William County. And people are out there doing it. They're still transcribing records. You know, they're still abstracting. And look what FamilySearch is doing. So never assume that you have finished working in an area. Always go back and visit. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Then you always want to study the guides to the manuscript collections, even the dated ones, because these, even now, used to be a lot of institutions did when I started. A lot of institutions, even the University of Virginia, did not have a complete card catalog of their special collections. Today, most of them do. Okay. But sometimes the descriptions leave a lot to be desired, and usually the published ones are much more thorough. Now, the Library of Virginia has a, probably about the same size as mine. I have to look at the page well. No. But it's about this thick, just of their personal papers collection. But there are better descriptions for some of them in the books than there are in the card catalog. So it was well worth the price. And that's still available. I think they haven't sold it yet. And then this is the manuscript room in the Library of Virginia for those of you that have never been there. See all those little books? Those are finding aids to various collections at the library that provide more detailed explanations of what they have. And all of them are filled with marginal notes that archivists over the years have added about various items in the collection. And every manuscript collection has them somewhere. They may not be so obvious as these, but they got them. They may be under the door. Then, how many of you are familiar with this? Well, it used to have a different name, but then they added West Virginia to it. So it's now the Archival Resources of the Virginias. It's actually hosted by the University of Virginia. And there's a member list. So I got to go get my pointer thing again. What did I do with it? Well, what happened to it? Oh, it's down here. Okay. All right. They even have a member list so you can figure out who's there. Now, watch this, because some institutions are just putting their new finding aids that they're creating, posting those. They're not posting older ones. So you may find an institution that only has 5 finding aids. That doesn't mean that's all the finding aids they have. It's just all the ones they put up. Okay. The Library of Virginia is religious about putting current finding aids up, at least. But it's a great resource to just sort of get an idea of what is available. All right, that didn't help, did it? Well, one of the first things, and I did this recently, well, last October, exactly almost a year ago, I was getting ready to give a lecture on family stories at Rising series of lectures out of Salt Lake for BCG. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do Grandpa. Now, he actually is the person that's responsible for my being a genealogist today. So you that never did know. I forget why I asked, but I asked for some reason, something about where the Vineses came from. Maybe somebody had asked me, I don't remember. And I was 17, 18 at the time. And I asked my aunt, because I knew she did genealogy on her family. She was a Wood from Central Virginia. They've never sorted them out either. And she said, well, I don't know. And says, well, I said, well, I'll ask Grandpa. Well, he won't tell you anything. He won't talk about the family. All right, now you're 18. What's going to happen? Well, I'll show him. I knew where they were. So I trucked myself over to Monroe County. First trip in the courthouse. Went in and started browsing the records. Oh, here's a death record index. So I open it up to the Vineses, and there's a Mary Vines, deceased, date of deaths, informant, Phoebe Vines, daughter-in-law. Phoebe's father is Mary's father is Jacob Gregory. Oh, good. I know who Phoebe is. Grandma knew her. She's got Phoebe's quilt that she quilted. She was the Dunsmore. Goody, goody, goody. And so I tracked my Vineses, and I tried to track the Gregorys. They were non-landowning in the Irish tract, and so very difficult to track. And every so often, about that time, eventually, I figured that they got married because the Gregorys were from Rockbridge County, that I needed to get the marriage license, marriage certificate. Yeah, hadn't been published, but I never got around to it. Every time I went to the Library of Virginia, I had a list longer than the amount of time I had. Besides, I knew, they were married, who they were. I didn't really need that, right? Right. Had a son, Silas Smith Vines. Now, never could figure out how Silas Smith got in the family, because everybody else was, John and William and single names. I mean, no double names. Why Silas Smith? Well, there was a Silas Smith in Augusta, but not related. Besides, he had money. They didn't. And didn't think anything more about it. 30 years, 40 years passed. And somebody published a book of Rockbridge County marriages. Oh, there's their marriage. Copy it, drop it in the file folder. So I pull out the file folder to build this family store, right? And I'm building a little tree so I can explain everybody. And I'm putting in birth dates, and I'm putting in death dates, and I'm putting in marriage dates. Well, that must be wrong. So then I go to look and see just where did we figure out, oh, well, the censuses all agree that that's when he was born. Well, let's try the tombstone. Nope, tombstone agrees too. But that was 6 years before he married. And then you sit down and you think, okay, so what's going on here? Well, duh. She was a stepdaughter-in-law. This was another supposed, I assume there's an earlier marriage. Now I got to go find out. So it is always wise to go back and look at what you've done to make sure that, you're not following the wrong trail. I don't know how many more I'm going to find like that. But I was so proud of my first, and it turns out to be wrong. Okay. So is there land and this is one people miss all the time. It's another one I learned early on. Actually, it was my first client. He had a guy who he was sure was the son of this guy, but he wasn't mentioned in the will. All the other kids were mentioned in the will. This guy wasn't. Petersburg area. So verified it. Yeah. And then I finally sit down and compared it with the land taxes. Work. This is all the guy. So you make your circle a little bit bigger, and you start looking at people, and lo and behold, I find this will that mentions this guy's name. Turns out it was his grandmother who had left him 1,500, 2,000 acres. I've forgotten how much at the time. I think Daddy thought he had enough. And so he parceled out the rest of his land amongst the other children. And so there you were. So it's, you always check. You always check. That's like the census records. I ended up in South Carolina with them simply because I did every census year for this family. And in 1 year, the wife's sister was living with him as a grass widow. And her birthplace was South Carolina. Now, the family was from Virginia. One member went to South Carolina and died, was what we had always thought. Obviously, two brothers went to South Carolina. One died, one came back home. And so there you are. And do you have the documentation? All right. Now, I always liked this one from Dean. David was the one that said it, that you can always find another record. It's out there somewhere. You just got to keep looking. All right. The issue, you really don't want to do that, do you? You know, that, I always love it. Well, you're allowed 3 requests at the Library of Virginia at a time in the manuscript room. So I always give them my first 3. And they come down and they say, well, which one do you want first? And I said, the one with the answers in it, please. It never works out that way. Okay. Then there's the other approach is we just collect stuff. There'll be car keys in here somewhere, right? We get enough stuff, we'll find it. Well, we can do that, but it's going to take a long time, and you're going to go down a lot of rabbit holes. Of course, rabbit holes can be fun, but clients don't like you doing it. All right. Know the difference between a hound dog and a bloodhound? A bloodhound follows a specific trail. A hound dog, you put him out and you start circling. And they keep circling. And they keep circling. And the circle keeps getting bigger. But eventually you hear this whoa, and he is off and running. Okay? Because he's found the trail. And that's what a good researcher does. You start, you know, with the most obvious. So one guy said, I want to know how you do this. And I said, well, I start with the most obvious. I said, you don't want me to start with the least. And I work out from there, you know, depending on what I find or I don't find, that's where it tells me where to go next. And so that's what I do. He said, oh, so anyway, but it really is. I mean, once you don't obviously find the answer the easy way, then you want to spend your time the best way you can. So you look at what you have and figure out what's the most likely source for what you want. But in order to know what do you want, you know, well, what do you want? You know, do you want to know the mother or the father? You know, do you, well, I want to get in Jamestown. Oh, well, that's good. So we just start with your relatives and go down the list until I find one, right? No, even there, you start with the most likely person to have made it to Jamestown, which is probably not going to be a German ancestor. You know, leave these off to the side. All right. So now we'll see some samples of how this works. Andrew Montague, that was the same Andrew that we talked about earlier, who left widow who remarried a Daniel, and you know, and they were arguing over the daughter's cow. Well, this is the other end. I had somebody from Kentucky that was sure Andrew was the father, but the lineage society they wanted to get into needed some proof. Okay. So he wanted to know who this Kentucky guy's parents were, but he pretty sure it was Montague. So I'll start with Andrew since he's the only Montague of the right age, you know, in this area. Okay. Now there are no probate records, But I can tell from the personal property taxes, which is one of the first things I do, that he either died or left the area. Okay. There are no death records for that time period. There are no birth records for that time period. No marriage records list him as the father. There are no Bible records or family histories at the local or at the Library of Virginia or the Virginia Historical Society. Shows up in the census in 1830, 1840, 1820, which, so the kids are tick marks. At his death, he owned 94 acres of land. Now, you better believe I was most grateful that that wasn't a nice round 100. The reason being that during a certain period of time, as long as it was under 100 acres, you didn't have to pay an extra tax. So when you got a patent, so it was a 94-acre parcel. There was no transfer in the deeds. I tracked it for 25 years under his name, to 1870. Nothing. Quit. Go somewhere else. Well, I figured eventually it's got to disappear. So when does it disappear? In 1891, 46 years. Never was listed as his estate, which it should have been. Just listed as Andrew Money. 46 years. Double check the grantor index. I must have missed it. Well, no, I didn't. Back to the tax records. So what are you going to do next? Somebody had to buy it. Somebody got it somewhere. So I look in the year that I have it in 1891, and I find 3 94-acre parcels. One of them's Andrew's, and there are 2 more. Go to 1892, I find 3 94-acre parcels. None of them are Andrew. But 2 of them are the 2 guys that were there in 1891. So back to the deed index again. And then I look up the guy, and it was sold to him by commissioners. Court suit. Okay. Now I could have done it the other way around. I could have located the land, tried the neighbors, followed the neighbors until one of them mentioned who the new one was. But in this case, 46 years, did I want to do that? That's the hard one. Now, if it had been 100 acres, I might have. I could check the docket books for a court case, including sons-in-laws. Or, since the Library of Virginia now has a Chancery Court index, I could go find the 1891 court suit that includes in it a letter naming the son in Kentucky and his kids that had been sent back. So what turned out, and it happens more than you think, was that they tried to sell it, and it was in the Pine Barrens, so it wasn't worth squat. Why went to Kentucky? And so a cousin farmed it and paid the taxes. Well, see, most people doesn't register. The person who pays the taxes doesn't have to be the owner. The taxing authority wants their money. They really don't care whether Santa Claus gives it to them or not. As long as it's hard cash, credit card, whatever. Of course, they charge you for credit cards. But that's what's going on here. And then the cousin finally died, and so there was nobody to pay the taxes, and so it got sold for back taxes, and off you go. Okay. Now remember, those are all things that you can ask yourself. But the one thing that you need to be most careful about is, have you set an artificial time period? And remember, the Borden suits finally got settled, what, 150? Yeah, 150 years later. This one was 47. I see them all the time, 20, 25 years. Geography, Herndon suit I told you about. We went from Caroline County to South Carolina, Georgia, to Tennessee, to Kentucky. End events. So old George Washington. My luster's caused me more problems. He shows up in the 1820 census, age 16 to 26. Shows up in the 1830 census, age 40 to 50. Never have found him in the 1840 census under any name, so I don't know where he was. 1850, he was 58, born in Pennsylvania. 1860, he's 65 and born in Virginia. You ever get that? A lot. Kids don't know where their parents were born. 1880, he's 88. He and his parents were born in Pennsylvania. Well, I'm going with Pennsylvania because it shows up more frequently than anything else. And because it's a logical transfer down there, and there are no, well, there was a John Lusher living on, and I traced him, boy, I know more about him than I did about George Washington, and he definitely wasn't George's father. Okay. So it was likely born somewhere between 1792 and 1795. Now, there's a local history book. Let me see if I have that. Maybe later. If I do, I'll tell it to you now anyway. So there is a local history book that says, I'll get there. We'll go back up here. That he was, at the age of 100, he walked 17 miles. There's a family story that he walked 7 miles to church and back. I don't think he would have gone to church. He didn't quite fit that pattern. Most of his daughters had children out of wedlock. So at any rate, he was sometime. 1795 seems to, no, Barbara, there we go again. 1795. He was born 1792 to 1795, and he died about 1895. No one's exactly sure, but that seems to be the best bet, because he had a great nephew that remembered him and did family research, history research, though it was very poor research. But anyway, no other Lushers in the region except that John that I followed. George said he served in the War of 1812 for Randolph County. His pension was rejected, and it took me years to find, you know, you go to all these indexes and they list the War of 1812 pensioners. Guess who they don't list? The rejected pension. And by the way, just in case you did not know, there is a book of published rejected pensions for Virginia rejected Revolutionary War pensioners. Somebody figured that one out. But at any rate, there's a George Lusher up there, but he was still alive in 1840. And he died and left a will. There's under it. And then George's grandma always talked about him as the red-headed Irishman. I did dinner talk on that one. Oh, she got mad at me when she saw the title of that. He was too. I've got the plate that we used to eat fried chicken off of at his table. Grandma lived to be 102. But that was something. This is about as bad as when I tried to give her fake margarine because the doctor said it would be good for her. Been eating butter all my life. Don't plan on stopping now. And she didn't. But anyway, I figured that part of it out. When I saw the marriage record, it was Mary Hara. But when you work on the family, it turns out she was Mary O'Hara. So I know where he got his red hair. She died in 1861. Okay. In 1870 and 1880, he was living with an unmarried daughter and her two children. Widower in 1880. served in the Civil War. And then some in his 60s, late 60s then. He was a carpenter wheelwright. And so I doubt if he marched 2 steps the entire time he was in the service. Confederates needed wheelwrights really bad, those West Virginia roads. So, but I do have, I mean, there was no question. He served in the Civil War, and I believe I know what happened and why he's not, his pension wasn't accepted in the other war. There were two brothers, both were captains. One of them took a troop to Norfolk. The other one took a troop west. Militia rolls survived for one and not for the other, or whether they survived for the other one, but Narrow won't let you look at them because they're too fragile. So I guess they're just going right away. But anyway, nobody mentioned Elizabeth. Of course, it was a short marriage. By 1870, she was living alone with a young child and her 2 former children. But the marriage record gave me the name of his father and where he was born. Because that was 1867 after Virginia started keeping those records. And that one I would love to claim. However, it was my untutored, totally genealogically untutored aunt, whom I had taken to the archives to show her her Hungarian ancestors on the census rolls. And so she wanted to pay back. And I set her down and said, well, if you want to look through these marriage records, you know, and I gave her a list of family names. Failing to tell her when to stop. And so she didn't stop. And that's what I got. Taught me a big lesson. Let me tell you. People don't mention a lot of things in the family. I figured out Powhatan because, you know, grandma, great-great-grandma would have been 55 when he was born, but he's listed in the census as her son. Then you have Roland Wheeler, who's out there in West Virginia, 1794, killed by the Indians in Kanawha County. And there's a big write-up in the history book about the massacre of the whole family. 1 child survived, 1 was captured. Okay, that's nice. I've got a Roland Wheeler back in Bedford County. All right. Roland Wheeler's Wheeler's not unusual, but Roland is. And we had later Rolands in the family, William Roland. And I was sure that it had to be the same guy. But how do you prove it? I even found some Bedford people that were out there in Kanawha with him at the same time, the same place on the river. And just no connection, nothing. I'd given up. I was down in Bedford County doing something else with a friend. And I finished what I had come for. And she hadn't. So while she was finishing up, I thought, well, what else can I do? Oh, you all have gotten some of these records sorted and compiled. And here's a John Wheeler. I don't remember getting anything on John Wheeler. How about letting me look at this court case? I later found it online. 18 and 23. So that was only what? 6 plus 23, 29 years later. He's in court suing Shrewsbury because Shrewsbury supposedly settled his father's estate because he had been captured by the Indians and wasn't back. And Shrewsbury had absconded with his father's estate. I suspect Shrewsbury was married to a daughter. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, I never have time for my own work. But 29 years later, back in Bedford County, I get the proof not in Kanawha where he moved to, back in Bedford. I get the proof that it's the same guy. 29 years later. And just because I said, well, let me see about John. I vaguely remembered that there was a John in the family that got killed out of no. I thought he had, the family lore was he went to North Carolina. Well, he did. I mean, Tennessee. He did, but after this. So, and this is the Herndon suit that I mentioned earlier. Entered in 1838 in Logan County, Kentucky. 1758 Carolina Mill. And all the other people. But this is the one that will kill you. My cousin did this one. I did not. She's more tenacious than I am. I think she's got 47 ancestors in the DAR now. About half of them are mine. Half of them are her paternal line. But she just gets hold of it and keeps going. Now, Guilford Davis shows up in Monroe County. There are a number of other Davises. And I have stripped that county of information on Davises. Okay. Never owned land. There's no probate or death record. His marriage record doesn't list his parents. Court records are negative. All the other Davises have been searched. Children were all followed. Birth, marriage, death, census, nothing. First appears in the tax records in Monroe County in 1817 at the age of 27. Born in Virginia, which we already knew from the census. Okay. All right. Of course, Monroe County, for those of you who are not familiar with West Virginia, is right on the Virginia-West Virginia border, across from Botetourt. Well, Carol Lee sits down and she says, well, he had to be somewhere. I said, yeah, you're right, somewhere. Do you know how many counties there are in Virginia? Oh, yeah, she was moving. But she didn't care. She started in Monroe County, 17, 16, and 15, I think were the 3 years that she checked. And she just worked her way east in the personal property taxes for every county. She found him in Orange. That's where I live. She found him in Orange. And there are Davises there, and there are other families. The Ballards were one that moved right from Orange and lived in the same area that Guilford did, and moved right to the same area in Monroe County that he was, right there in Paulding Creek. So, yeah. Depends on how hard you want to work. And then you can also do the other thing. Like my county minister's marriage register in Arkansas. By the way, I published that in the magazine of Virginia Genealogy. You don't have to go to Arkansas. A Virginia Bible record in Louisiana. Now that one was a find, an accidental find. For some reason, they were looking for, it was back when, you know, societies exchanged journals, and they were reaching out. And so they sent, I was doing the newsletter at the time as well as the journal, and they sent sample copies. Just wanted us to, you know, if we would review them or mention them in the newsletter. So I did, you know, and if you're going to review them or mention them, you want to know what you're talking about. So I'm leafing through. Well, I know that family. And so help me, Hannah. I went back, there was an estate sale. The family Bible got sold and the widow bought it. And then she remarried and they moved to Louisiana from the Carolinas. And that Bible went to Louisiana and got published in the Louisiana Journal there. Same thing happened to me with Kanawha County. The only record I have of the Lowry family is a Bible record published in Kanawha County Genealogical Journal. I mean, it's not anywhere else. I know, not in the NGS Bible records. You know, how many of y'all know about the NGS Bible records? Oh, okay. You know, they have, how many, Shirley? Shirley's still here? How many? Okay. And they're all online. And if you're a member of NGS, you have access. Okay. That Bible record isn't anywhere else. So anyway, you've got a very famous group of records. They're, well, I guess they're family papers or personal papers is what I really should say. But this guy was an avid collector. And when he died, his relatives, they say that you could walk up the steps if you were very careful because you only had this much space to walk in. But it got sold to a renowned library in California. Microfilm copies are now available at the Library of Virginia. And then we have Robert. Oh, this is another one people do all the time. Me included, I've done it more than once. Robert Wheeler. That was Roland's son, grandson. No death record, no obituary, no probate. Land was distributed to his children by deed in the early 1850s. The younger children were living with older siblings in the 1860s. In 1860, he disappears from the tax records in 1856. The graves in the Wheeler Cemetery, which I have personally viewed, are only fields. So. Dead. No reason not to believe he's dead, right? September 5th, 1876. He applies for and is rejected for an 1812 pension. Let's see, we figured out he died in 1856, so that's only 20 years, right? Well, see, I was doing all this work. It's my excuse anyway. Back when the only places that you could find census records, I mean, the Library of Virginia had census records for Virginia and adjacent states. They did not have Missouri census records. I could have gone up to the National Archives, but you know, that was sort of, I taught summer school and winter school. So I never got to the census records to figure out that no, his son William hadn't died. His son William had gone to Missouri. And Daddy fought later. And so then when I did a little more digging, I figured out that this stray Robert Wheeler that married this on the other side of the county, married okay. All right.
Keep going.
Told you I was a witch. So I think I've never been able to prove, but I think there was a straight marriage over against the Giles County border, about 40 miles in West Virginia roads, 3 hours. That he married again, even though his pension application says he's unmarried, and she was still living as a Wheeler over there. She had one son, Pennington. And apparently they did not get along very well because he left for parts unknown and ended up in Missouri. I'm not exactly sure when he died, but sometime before 1880. And the application was 1876, so sometime during that time period. I think this is, you know, okay. But his pension application, because I had never been able to get past Roland before. But I think when I get time, that now with his pension application and his talk about cousins, that I can connect him to the person that I suspected was Roland's father. I'll just have to wait and see. But he mentions two of his cousins that are not in my direct line, not Roland's children or grandchildren. So we will see. And then you return to the scene of the crime. And this is the one that I told you about that you need to go back and check every so often? Okay. So I'll read it in case you can't. The only record for this marriage is an entry in a will book 9, which lists the names of the parties and the dates of the license. It's from the minister's return. According to the Historical Records Survey, WPA, for Monroe County, permission slips covering this period were placed in a separate bundle tied with a blue ribbon. An extensive on-site search of the records of Monroe County, which have been given to Colson Library at West Virginia University, I borrowed 100 reels and looked at them frame by frame while my husband was watching football and baseball and basketball and everything else online. There wasn't any bundle. Whatever happened to it, I don't know. Because I've been through everything in that courthouse. However, in the 1850s, in an attic in Monroe County, published on the West Virginia Gen Web, are school records. Now, these survived for some counties. They were made for every county in Virginia, in West Virginia at the time. They typically give you the name of the student, the name of the parents, the number of days they attended school, and what they studied, like spelling, reading, whatever that is. I can't read it, and arithmetic. Okay. Writing, spelling, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what it is. So, and there she is, Susan Davis, daughter of Guilford Davis. Okay. Or you do Sidney Withrow, Lusher's father. This one I wrote up and is in the BCG. Oh, I'm over time. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, essentially what it happens is I can't connect her. I've done everything I did with the Withrows, what I did with the Davises. And Grandma knew Sidney, and she knew Sidney's sister, Eliza, who married Zach Wood. And but she didn't know who his parents were. And the history book had it wrong. I figured that out. So I am back doing my yearly research in West Virginia and stopped at the Raleigh County Library, not at Summers and Monroe, the Jason County Library, leafing through records that they had. And there was this little tiny book, just a piece of paper and a staple pamphlet type thing. Church, biography of church members. Zach Wood's in there. White's not, but he is. And Zachariah Wood said, oh, yes, and Zachariah Wood married Eliza Withrow, daughter of Alders. Well, now I can take Grandma's word that Eliza and Sidney were sisters, but I have no other proof because they were tick marks. And then I go looking for Zach, and Zach dies, and his obituary is in the newspaper. And it says he dies at the home that he and Eliza didn't have any children. He died at the home of his nephew, Andrew Jackson Lusher, Sidney's husband. And so I got it. But if I hadn't gone back to that library and found that little book, I'd still be up a creek without a paddle. So you need to go back and visit again. You never know what gems have arrived since you left, okay? And that's just reminding you of what you should do. So we will stop here. And thank you very much. And I do sincerely apologize for running out. I told you I like to talk.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Well, now you're supposed to tell me you learned something.
Oh, they did.
All teachers want to know whether or not their students learn.
Okay. What do I need to know here? Name tags? Okay. I think you're supposed to return your name tag. Am I interpreting that correctly? Okay, I'll do my best. And just in terms of housekeeping, if you have the opportunity, just glance in the wastebasket that's at the end of your table, and anything that's in there needs to be end up in a bucket. In a minute or two, we'll take that trash bag because it looks pretty full and put a new trash bag in there. But we just need to get the trash out so they don't charge us an extra $200 to have somebody show up to clean up, which we'd rather not pay.
You can buy books with that.
Pardon me? Yeah, you can buy a lot of stuff with that. So it's all good. Are there any other announcements that somebody thinks I should be making? Okay, I don't.